We're
Okay.
super lucky today on Culture Rodeo to be able to bring you a very interesting interview. Today we are interviewing Mike Tutt, who's holding this awesome exhibition in Brantford this weekend on his own artwork, and also Phil Hartman. And on our interview today, we are so lucky to be joined by Phil Hartman's brother, Paul. And Paul is joining us from Alberta. And so there's this really interesting story of these three Hartman brothers from Brantford who moved down to California to LA and had some massive success. But first, a word from our sponsors. You should always have wine on hand because you never know when a celebration will pop up. Well, welcome to Positano Wines on King George Road. Great wine made easy. Call today. Paul, how long did you live in Brantford and where did you go from here?
Well, I lived in Brantford until I was 5, and we moved to Connecticut to a place called Lake Cocknoagan. And we were briefly there and then moved to California. My parents had gone to California to see a Rose Bowl football game for their honeymoon. And they were like, we're moving here. Because that happens in the winter and people are wearing shorts and t-shirts and uh, and sure enough we ended up in Anaheim, a mile from Disneyland, and we had an uncle that worked there, and Phil and I would walk over there like twice a month, and we could go anytime we wanted for free.
Oh, wow. That must have been a dream as a child.
Yeah, so that Phil had a real affinity for Walt Disney, and uh, Mike has some cartoons that he did of a yogi and a kid, and they're very Disney-esque in their style, and they were some of the only things Phil did that were meant directly to be animated. And we'd worked on putting together that, and it was very hard to find a quality Indian actor that could do the character here in Canada. And it got some headway, but kind of died back. And we're kind of regrouping on all that stuff.
So he wanted to do like a cartoon? Is that what he was
Yeah,
working on?
cartoon series. The premise was, and actually the yogi was modeled after my oldest brother John. At the time, John and Phil were living in Malibu, and John was living in the Malibu colony, right on the beach next door to uh, Charles Lloyd was on one side, the jazz musician, and Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward were on the other side. And John was living with the band Rock and Foo, who Phil did their first two album covers, and they were the first covers that he did. And those at some point we'll have in banners for the full exhibition when it happens.
Awesome. So yeah, just to catch the audience up. So John Hartman, the oldest brother, worked as a record producer and
He was an agent. John wanted to be an actor, and he came out to California before my parents and myself, and started going to college at Santa Monica City College, where they had a really good theater arts department. And he wanted to learn how to get into show business, which was very tricky back then. And what happened was one of the people in his theater arts group came in and said, "Hey, there's an ad in the LA Times today saying that they're taking people for the mailroom at William Morris." So he went and he signed up, and his first day in the mailroom was with David Geffen. and he and David Geffen rose up through the company very rapidly. And the first artist John signed to William Morris was Sonny and Cher.
Oh, we might.
And it just kind of went on from there. He signed the Grateful Dead, the Jefferson Airplane, Buffalo Springfield.
Wow.
And so that led to him becoming the first employee of Asylum Records, which was David Geffen's first record company. And he was in the biography about David Geffen, and worked at Lookout Management with Elliot Roberts, and it was Elliot Roberts, John Hartman, Harlan Goodman, Urs Azoff, who ended up with the Eagles as their manager, was an office boy, and it kind of went from there. I mean, they had Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Jackson Brown, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young,
It sounds like they didn't leave
Poco.
many other musicians for other record labels. They got them all.
No, they didn't. The thing about David Geffen and John was that they built an environment for artists and protected artists, right? And that was what gave them the greatest success and made them so desirable to other musicians. And starting out at William Morris was one of those things that really gave it legs. John ended up getting the Heller Award, which is the highest award you can get if you're a manager, agent, or casting director.
Wow.
And yeah, and
Like,
still lives in LA.
well, they made all those bands known to the world, so good for them.
Harlan Goodman, Elliot Roberts, who passed away a couple years ago, was a phenomenal manager. David Geffen supported him till the day he died. He really was a critical part of Geffen's whole process.
Very interesting. And your brother, Phil Hartman, who we know as a comedian, worked in the art department for your brother John and created some covers, correct?
Yeah. 1980 in Los Angeles. Firesign Theater signs to Hartman and Goodman, and Phil Hartman becomes the art director for their next cover. Phil produces a fascinating cover for the Firesign Theater's Fighting Clowns. And in the background you can see Carter and Reagan fighting it out in the front lawn of the White House, while Russian bears drop from helicopters and peel open oil tanks and eat the contents like honey. Surprisingly, all the images in the foreground are in the image of Phil Hartman. Phil had a real talent for illustration and graphic arts, which at the time was exceedingly more difficult than it is now, because there wasn't things like Photoshop. You had to actually be able to draw. And that's kind of what you see in the stuff that Mike has, like the pencil drawing of the Screwhead, which is a self-portrait of Phil, demonstrates the skill he had to draw. And all that came from my mother, and her father was an engraver at the Mint in the US. And so it came through that part of the bloodline.
Oh, isn't that interesting? And so, Mike, can you talk about what you are doing with these special pieces?
Well, Mike has been collecting these pieces, and anytime I put something up for sale, he bought it. And it made me feel very safe. I was afraid that it was all going to get too spread out. And he, in his infinite wisdom about art, knew that it was a good thing, and put a lot of resources into the collection. And what happened was I got into a conversation with a producer named Danny Menlo, and he hooked me up with a guy named Kim Saltarsky, who is a director and has done a lot of kind of Netflix and Amazon Prime projects, did a couple of the Police Academy movies and things like that, and had kind of moved into the documentary area. And I had a discussion with him about, nobody's done anything about Phil's art. They always want to go toward the dark side of what happened. And, when you look at somebody's life, their death is but a small portion of what actually happens in the whole game, right? And this was something that my wife pointed out to me, and it he got it. He got that. Yeah, there's enough substance here to where we can draw on that and get a project going. And then when John had just finished writing his memoirs, and I said, this is not just a one-off. This is like you could literally do one on Phil, one on John, and then I'm the oddball. Like I worked in show business too, but I got in as a result of having some legal issues with cannabis in the old days, and I was the music industry was driven on psychedelics and cannabis. My mother was an avid gardener, and my earliest memory is crawling around in her backyard garden in Brantford and pirating her strawberries. And that led to me hobby gardening. And then eventually in California, I had a 480-acre farm, certified organic, doing 25 farmers markets a week and selling food to restaurants as far away as Las Vegas and the Bellagio, both restaurants there and the MGM Grand were the substance of what we did in Las Vegas. And then it was Harrison Ford's son had a restaurant in LA called Earth, and several other places. Wolfgang Puck was a big fan because we would do the Beverly Hills Farmers Market on a Sunday morning, and we set up in front of the Gucci store right across from Wolfgang's restaurant. And I'd get there at 5:30 in the morning, and Wolfgang would be standing up front waiting for me. And it was fun because I'm a foodie, and creating high quality food for families and restaurants, and doing the farmers market on Rodeo Drive there on Sunday morning. I fed more stars than Wolfgang.
Oh,
So
that's awesome. And
it was amazing.
would you say that your cannabis might have also sort of lend its hand to the vibe of the music industry in that day?
Oh, absolutely. It was considered the finest you could get at the time, and I was quite proud of it. And I was there in the heyday of the industry. Now you can't say that about any of it. It's all kind of sad.
Yeah, all that part of culture sort of took a turn for darker days, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it became I think their whole plan was to diminish the industry by making it legal, and they did. It's some of the finest growers in the world don't grow anymore.
Interesting perspective. Yeah, well, it would have been nice having a full organic farm. Like, I love food and love to cook, so I certainly can appreciate the value there. And just to,
Yeah, on my Facebook page, there's a photo. My banner photo is a shot of was an ad for Whole Foods. We had our own section in Whole Foods,
wow.
and it. I mean, we were kind of famous for being the kings of diversity. You know, we would grow 12 kinds of watermelons, 37 kinds of tomatoes, you know, 8 kinds of cucumbers, 10 kinds of eggplants, 15 kinds of garlic, you know, and onions and everything, all the herbs. And it was literally a one stop. And I'm told by farmers market managers that nobody has duplicated what we did since we left.
Very labor intensive, especially
Yeah.
to do that for a certified organic farm. That's a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah, and basically it was a 480-acre farm, but we would do 150 acres in rotation, and it really produced some exceptional quality. And my favorite thing was, like, I would do the deliveries to Las Vegas because I'd get to eat at the chef's table. And so I would go to the Bellagio, I'd have lunch at Olive, and then would have dinner at Picasso. And then the next day we would have lunch at the MGM Grand and get to see what the chef was doing with the product we were producing and talk about what we could get into production that would give them a unique edge.
So you guys have done a lot since you've left Brantford.
Yeah,
The big dreams.
yes, we have. My father had a serious work ethic, and it definitely was handed down to the brothers and the sisters. The sisters all have done very creative things with stores. My mother had a collectible shop in San Juan Capistrano in California, and I understand Mike actually has a painting by her.
By your mom?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
When you, after the Walk of Fame party that you had at the station here, I think it was one of your family members had brought it up to give it to someone else, and they weren't comfortable taking it back on the plane, so they asked if I wanted it. So that's how I still have it. It's a great painting by your mother.
Yeah, she did some wonderful stuff. I mean,
Beautiful
and
painting.
she did. She liked to do what they call toll painting, which was painting on boxes and stuff like that. And she was very industrious. Like, she put her heart and soul into whatever she did, and painting and being creative was one of them. And she passed it on to everybody in the family. That creative cycle went to John, and John fostered creativity in a way that I've never seen in anybody. He understood how to get the best out of an artist, and did that for Phil and for me in different ways. Um, and for many of our favorite musicians.
Wow, that's awesome. And so Mike Tutt was the person who ran the Station Arts Gallery in Brantford for many years.
Yeah.
And so we're excited that he is taking on a new space this weekend to show, have an anniversary for one of his piece of work, and also to show some Phil Hartman originals. So Mike, maybe you can talk about what people can expect to see if they come.
Sure. Well, what they're gonna see is, starting over here is the original drawing I did, a gesture drawing in 1977. And then I used it in 1984 to create, I'm gonna call it a poster print that I sold in Toronto at 10 or 15 different places, different galleries, stores. I was working at the Bamboo Club at the time. It had just opened, and I was selling it there. I had an exhibit that year at the Rivoli, just down the street from Bamboo, summer of '84. And then I added on to the print other interesting events, and not certain things that did happen in '84 and didn't. For example, over there, you've got Wayne Gretzky in '84 won the first Stanley Cup. That's signed by Wayne. This second one here is Trudeau. That was the last year, 84. He was the Prime Minister of Canada. And I gave him a series of the 10, and he signed one and sent it back to me. So right now I've got about 40 or 50 of the 1984 prints on display in this beautiful space. And then over here in the best lighting possible, I've got 4 original Phil Hartman drawings that I've just had framed. And they're all 4 of those are early pieces that he did in the late 60s.
It's really interesting to have this opportunity in Brantford of all places. And yeah, I hope people come out. So the opening is on Friday night.
Friday night here from 5 p.m. till 8, and then I'll be open here again from Saturday and Sunday from noon until 5 p.m.
Awesome.
The building is the original Forester's building here in Brantford. This was the head office for all of Canada when it was founded in the 1800s. We're located right across Victoria Park in downtown Brantford, and
So the address is 84 Market Street.
yeah.
And it's a great space. So Mike has some interesting also history in Brantford. He sort of spearheaded, well, I shouldn't say sort of, he spearheaded the casino to come into downtown Brantford and fill the vacated building that it's in now. Mike also has some other strong visions for Brantford. I don't want to spill the beans, but if you like this sort of thing, you should really come down this weekend and ask Mike about them. He was able to scrape up a committee to help him with the casino. And so, you know, if you're sort of a person who likes to be part of these amazing projects happening, I'm sure Mike would invite you to be part of his team. So come down and hear what he's got to say. We'll see you on the weekend, and hopefully this is the beginning of, you know, more interesting projects to come into Brantford. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.